Vampire Hunter D revels in its premise, which is reminiscent of medieval Europe. Although Hideyuki Kikuchi brings his own flavors to this premise, such as the usage of advanced technology and the existence of mutants, the true essence of the show lies in its old-school, gothic nature. In a world of bloodthirsty vampires, Kikuchi introduces a woman who is cruelty personified. Named Carmilla, she's inspired by the world's oldest vampire novella of the same name that predates even Dracula. Despite this inspiration, however, Kikuchi's Carmilla is an original character and, by extension, possesses traits that her namesake does not. While both Carmillas are extremely beautiful, Kikuchi presents Carmilla Bathory from Vampire Hunter D as the epitome of a femme fatale. The term depicts a seductive woman who often uses her sex appeal to lead men to their dooms, but the thing about Carmilla is that she does not discriminate in who she subjects to her wrath. Dressed in provocative feminine clothing that highlights her vanity and seductive nature, Carmilla amps up the fatale in the femme fatale by succumbing to her insatiable bloodlust and treating human lives like cattle and livestock that have been bred for consumption. A woman as vain as her would love to know that she is very much the main character of this video. Carmilla's life during her reign in the Society of Nobles. The story of Vampire Hunter D is set in a distant post-apocalyptic future where vampires, or the nobility, rule over the world with an iron fist. These vampires have seemingly descended from a vampire akin to Count Dracula, who acts as the forefather and the sacred ancestor of the race. Humans and vampires coexist, albeit not without their mutual disdain for one another. While the nobles are driven by their bloodlust towards humans and a sense of superiority over them, humans, after being oppressed for centuries with little to no methods of fighting back, have finally begun to regain their stronghold over society due to the rise of vampire hunters, as well as the fall of the nobles. We dive into deep detail about the nobles and their rise in one of our previous videos. Be sure to check it out to know more about how these vampires took over the world. We've heard enough about the sacred ancestor, for he is someone who is often mentioned and alluded to in the novels and movies alike. Acting as the vampire king, the sacred ancestor was not devoid of his queen, which brings us to his lover, Countess Carmilla Elizabeth Bathory. While the sacred ancestor considered a vampire's desire to consume human blood to be one of their biggest flaws, his queen had a bloodlust that put every other vampire to shame. As such, the noblewoman acquired the title of the Bloody Countess. Needless to say, she's a vampire of pure blood, which puts her at the top of the pyramid even without being the vampire queen. Count Carmilla was also renowned for her vanity. She was adorned by her elegant vermilion attire, a headdress, and gold. Red hair partially wrapped in gold hair accessories rested on her head, and the neckline of her dress plunged down to her navel as it left little to the imagination. For the 5,000 years when she ruled, her bloodlust and ferocity terrorized the human race, and her cruel nature was not something that was encouraged by the sacred ancestor. He detested her for how bloodthirsty and vain she was. For the reason her bloodlust crossed the threshold was her desperate need to stay young and beautiful. As her king's impatience reached its peak, he decided to take the life of his woman by driving a sword into her body while she was asleep. And although vampires are immortal, a stake being driven through the heart is generally an effective way to almost kill them. Almost. During the events of Vampire Hunter D Bloodlust, we learn that Carmilla Bathory, although dead, still has her corpse intact in her coffin at the castle she calls home. Due to her reputation, the demon castle became a place so filled with malign energy that even the nobles avoided it at all times. However, her character does come into the foray over the course of the story due to her role as the main antagonist. Carmilla's vicious personality that made her so infamous even among her own kind. Carmilla had acquired a terrible reputation not just among the nobles, but among the human race as well, and rightfully so, since they were the ones who fell victim to the Bloody Countess's gluttonous appetite for blood and unquenchable desire to stay beautiful. She was ruthless and reveled in the pain and misery of others. However, the fact that she is not just referred to as the Vampire Queen, but also the lover of the sacred ancestor, tells us that she may have had a redeemable personality once upon a time, which led to the sacred ancestor falling in love with her. Although born as a pure-blooded vampire, Carmilla Bathory acquired higher social status and wealth following her marriage to the Vampire King. It is possible that the prestige that came with her marriage corrupted her mind to the point of no return, making her the torturous noble she came to be known as. However, it is also possible that the woman who was the embodiment of cruelty truly just loved her husband. During her time with the sacred ancestor, she was exposed to the advanced technology that allowed the nobles to reach the zenith of their existence. She gained mystical knowledge, honed her abilities, her supernatural powers, and her intellect. Considering the fact that she ruled for 5,000 years and had the opportunity to get exposure to all the aforementioned things for 5 millennia, Carmilla is a noble whose skill sets outclass that possessed by most of the other nobles with relative ease, barring the sacred ancestor himself. She had become a master of weapons, handling equipment, battle strategy, and its quick implementation. Somewhere down the line, she wished for Dee the Dampier to work under her and serve her, and while Dee is possibly the biological son of the sacred ancestor, it does not imply that the latter cheated on Carmilla, considering the fact that the sacred ancestor used human DNA and fused it with his own to create Dee, instead of copulating with a human woman. Carmilla did not require her outstanding intellect to know that Dee's abilities were incredible. She knew that having Dee act on her commands and working by her side would extend her rule further, thus benefiting the twisted, bloody countess. She could continue treating human beings as livestock, but Dee was never the type to side with the nobles. His entire deal had always been about him standing against the vampiric tyranny, so of course, a woman who was disliked even by the nobles themselves would not be of high value to the vampire-hunting Dampier. As such, he refused to yield to her desires, which Carmilla interpreted as an act of hypocrisy due to him siding with humans and against vampires, and subsequently wasting his powers. Although Dee is canonically considered to be the second strongest character, after the second ancestor himself, Carmilla easily takes the cake for the third position, so it's not like she would fail to keep up her tyranny without Dee's help. Carmilla's arsenal of abilities allowed her to alter and manipulate her environment by performing acts of telekinesis, materialization, and dematerialization. She could project blasts of mystical energy, which could be confused for lightning. She was also a sorceress of the highest order, and her mystical spells gained enough popularity with the nobles for them to continue using them. Carmilla had mastered the art of mind control, telepathy, casting illusions, and using mind assaults to cast her victims into sleep. She had total control over her castle and its technology, and it almost felt like she haunted the place, thanks to her omnipresence and omniscience within the confines. She could attack several places and beings at once inside the castle while operating in her physical as well as her metaphysical forms. However, she needed to switch from her spirit form to her physical form in order to use her vampire powers at their full potential. The Bloody Countess also happened to be infamous for her Kiss of Nobility, which is the ability that allowed her to turn a non-vampire into a vampire. Of course, altered vampires do not exactly become nobles in positions of power, and instead have to serve those at the top of the hierarchy. Carmilla in Vampire Hunter D Bloodlust, how she tried to bring about her revival and instead met her ultimate demise due to her arrogance. Despite being the main antagonist in Vampire Hunter D Bloodlust, Carmilla does not appear until almost an hour into the movie. The central theme in the movie is a shared love between a greater noble named Meyer Link and a human woman named Charlotte Elborn. Aware of the fact that their existing society will never accept their unusual love, the duo is left with no choice but to desert the world. In the movie, Charlotte's family has hired Dee, as well as other vampire hunters, to bring Charlotte back, either dead or alive. They are dead set against her being transformed into a vampire. However, they are under the impression that Charlotte has been kidnapped and are oblivious to the fact that her disappearance has been orchestrated by herself and Meyer Link, since the two of them genuinely love one another. Meanwhile, Charlotte wishes to be transformed into a vampire by her lover. Dee, who lives a life of isolation and pain due to his nature as a Dampier, doesn't want the union of Meyer Link and Charlotte to be fulfilled. This is because he doesn't want another Dampier like him to come into the world. Meanwhile, Carmilla's spirit continues to haunt her castle despite the death of her physical body. When the knowledge of Meyer Link and Charlotte's forbidden romance reaches her, she concocts a cunning plan that she believes will help in her resurrection. Carmilla pays a mutant group called the Barbaroi to guard the couple from vampire hunters so they can escort them to her castle, and so they do. Then finally, we get to see the infamous palace, which is reminiscent of Gothic architecture. The castle sports pointed peaks like the animated castle we see in the beginning of Disney movies, but obviously, Carmilla's abode is far from being Disney-esque. The entire structure is drenched in crimson, while thousands of bats fly all across the area. Inside the castle, illuminated by red lights, waits Carmilla's spirit, as her new guests are escorted to the palace. In front of Charlotte and Meyer Link, the vampire queen pretends to be a good noblewoman who cares for the well-being of the couple. She tells them how love is the same for the humans and the nobles. She talks about how she is so glad to help them them out, and how the stories about her cruelty are nothing but mere rumors. She promises to help the couple reach the City of the Night, which is a place far away from the Earth at the end of the stars. Due to her position as a queen and how advanced vampire technology has been, her castle boasts a spaceship that can take the couple to their desired destination. In fact, nobles back in the day often used such spaceships to venture out of Earth's orbit. Needless to say, everything that has been laid out is nothing but a trap set by Carmilla. Carmilla needs to feed on Charlotte's human blood to revive her physical body. Her being confined to her domain in the castle and the fact that no humans ever enter the castle takes away Carmilla's chance at acquiring human blood. Considering the fact that Charlotte wishes to be transformed by Meyer Link's kiss of nobility, Carmilla is left with no choice but to rely on her ability to create illusions and be omnipresent in the castle. At first, she creates an illusion of Dee taking Charlotte with him to lure Meyer Link away. The false battle results in Meyer Link being gravely wounded, and he's put out of action. She then creates the illusion of Link going up the stairs to get to the spaceship, which results in Charlotte following the image. Soon, the image of Link digs his fangs into Charlotte's neck to turn her into a vampire, but in reality, it allows Carmilla to feed on the girl's blood, after which she leaves her for dead. The resulting reaction begins to revive her physical body from the coffin, and she recuperates in blood as her naked body starts to rise. Unfortunately for Carmilla, Dee is here to save Charlotte, since that is what he has been assigned to do. But he also knows that whether Charlotte is saved or not, Carmilla's resurrection must be ended. The vampire queen retaliates by trapping Dee in a mind prison. She tries to break him by creating illusions. She attempts to recruit him and tries to make him give in to his true nature as a partial vampire. Arrogantly, Carmilla talks about how nobles feeding upon humans are the same as humans consuming cattle and cattle consuming grass. She considers it to be the birthright of the nobles to give in to their bloodlust while calling Dee a hypocrite for hunting his own kind down. She believes that the vampire race is the one that's capable of living forever. Soon after, Dee hits her with the reality check of how much the world has changed compared to the time of Carmilla's reign. In this world, everyone is part of a transient race, and the vampire's ability to live forever is their downfall. However, the pompous Carmilla, having been secluded from society for centuries, fails to perceive the truth in Dee's world. At the same time, the sacred ancestor's golden sword, which had pierced her heart and had continued to stick to it, begins to release itself from Carmilla's physical body during the process of her resurrection. Fortunately enough, both Dee and Meyer Link have successfully come out of their mind traps by that time. While Dee once again pierces an almost revived Carmilla in the heart, Meyer Link takes down the bloodied spirit remains that have emerged out of the coffin to prevent it from draining more of Charlotte's blood. Dee's ability to overpower Carmilla with relative ease shocks her so much that she begins to question if she is descended from the sacred ancestor. However, that's it for Carmilla, because while in her previous death she had the chance of revival, but this time, Dee uses the homunculus on his left hand to bring an end to the bloody countess once and for all. Since Left Hand has the ability to absorb practically anything, Dee uses its powers to suck in the remnants of Carmilla's spirit. To know more about the Left Hand, check out its origin video on our channel right now. Despite Carmilla meeting her end, the story of Charlotte and Meyer Link ends on a sorrowful note due to Charlotte's death. However, he does end up taking her corpse with him to the City of the Night, so at least there's some comfort in knowing that. The thing about Carmilla, though, is that the concept for the character preceded that of Dracula, who inspired the sacred ancestor. It was 26 years before we learned about Dracula that the world was introduced to its oldest vampire novella named Carmilla. And although there is enough ground to draw parallels between the two Carmillas, there are enough grounds that prove how different the two vampire women are from one another. The oldest vampire novel that inspired Kikuchi to create his most evil antagonist. Irish author Sheridan Le Fanu and his 1872 Gothic novella named Carmilla is one of the earliest works of vampire fiction. It revolves around a young woman named Laura who begins to be preyed upon by a woman named Carmilla. Initially, the duo start out as friends and they grow to become very close. In fact, they had met one another for the first time during their childhood dreams when a beautiful Carmilla visited Laura in her bedchamber. Gradually, Carmilla begins to make romantic advances towards Laura. She keeps herself shrouded in mystery, refusing to tell Laura much about herself. Carmilla also avoids household prayers, sleeps throughout the day, and seemingly sleepwalks at night. At the same time, the nearby towns begin to report news of young women as well as girls dying from a mysterious malady. Around this time, Carmilla is seen bursting out in rage when Laura sings a funeral hymn, and the former complains about how the hymns hurt her ears. Not long after, a restored heirloom painting arrives at visit Laura's household, where the girls look at the picture of a woman named Milarka Karnstein, whose official title was Countess Karnstein. Dated in 1698, the woman seems to be one of Laura's ancestors. To her surprise, the Countess looks exactly like her friend Carmilla, from the face down to the mole on her neck. Carmilla deduces that she may have descended from a Karnstein. However, Laura soon begins to have dreams of being preyed upon and even sees figures of Carmilla standing by her bedchamber in a nightdress drenched in blood. Her health begins to deteriorate, and as such, she and her father go to the ruined village of Karnstein to get their questions answered. At the village, they learn about a woman named Milarka, whose presence had caused a woman named Bertha to succumb to the same illness as Laura. They had then consulted a priestly doctor who came to the conclusion that Bertha was being visited by a vampire. Later at night, as Milarka closed in on Bertha's throat, her uncle attacked the vampire, who managed to flee. It is later revealed that Carmilla and Milarka are the same people, and the two names are simply anagrams of one another. In the end, the descendant of a hero who had vanquished vampires manages to locate Milarka's tomb, where he witnesses her body breathing faintly while immersed in blood. A stake is subsequently driven into the body's heart, and its head struck off. Ultimately, the body of the Countess is burned to ashes and thrown into a river. The Carmilla from the novella does not possess the same bloodlust as the vampire queen. Her actions seem to be driven more by her desire for the women she catches feelings for instead of a rabid need to consume blood. The story shrouds her origins while giving us the necessary clues about her true nature, as we get to see her aversion toward prayers, hymns, and staying awake in the daytime. We also get to see Carmilla develop a strong homoerotic bond with Laura, although it never meets its fulfillment as a product of its time. However, as the story progresses, we get to see how Hideyuki Kikuchi created Carmilla Bathory as a character inspired by Milarka. This is made evident by the introduction of Milarka's bloodied corpse. The scene with Carmilla's corpse in the coffin in her castle, with the sacred ancestor's sword in her heart, is reminiscent of the faintly breathing Milarka inside her tomb. Both bodies are immersed in blood, and in both cases, a stake driven into the heart brings their lives to an end, although the spirits continue to exist. Needless to say, both Carmillas are also renowned for being beautiful countesses. Marvelous verdict! Vampire Hunter D engages with its fair share of vampire-esque cliches without making it tacky or unoriginal. And although cliches can be overdone, the right amount can help a piece of work acquire the status of being a cult classic. But such a title also requires said work to cater to not so much the general public and more so to a niche set of people, and this is where Carmilla comes in. Most of us got our exposure to vampires via Dracula, but the presence of Carmilla and her being based on the Countess from the ancestral novella speaks to those who are more well-versed with vampire fiction than the masses. As such, Vampire Hunter D manages to acquire another feather on its cap by attaining the status of cult classic. With that, today's video comes to an end. What did you think of Carmilla in Vampire Hunter D? Did you enjoy this video? If so, then don't forget to leave a like and comment down below. Until next time, thanks for watching, stay safe out there, and have a marvelous day.